rang shoge yu che ganesh dinara yu chen sheba.
Good afternoon. So this morning we continue to look at how the object and object possessor, or the object and subject, or the apprehended and the apprehender, that either of them, the way they appear to mind is as if they are independent, as if they do not depend on anything at all, but are self-existent. But when one investigates, one comes to recognize they do not exist in the way they appear at all. And in this way, we come to see that whatever object of our analysis, it is no different from a dream, in that in a dream, just like a horse appears to the mind as being real, and we believe there to be a horse, we then recognize later that that horse does not exist in the way that it appeared. So how then do things like the self and so forth exist? As dependent on being labeled by mind. So in the second of the 7 points, the main practice, we've looked at the first two. Now we come to the third. The antidote itself will also be liberated in its own nature. So the first word, antidote. Antidote then, what it refers to, the wisdom that realizes that all phenomena or any phenomenon is empty of existing in the way that it appears, empty of inherent existence. So it's the wisdom realizing emptiness, or the wisdom realizing selflessness. So looking at the whole of the third point, but starting with the word, the antidote. So again, the antidote, this being the third point, so we're building on the first, and then the second, and now the third. Whatever object appears to mind, that's in the first point, we've come to recognize is empty of inherent existence. So too, the realizing consciousness, the wisdom realizing emptiness itself, the realizing consciousness, that too, the second point, is empty of inherent existence. So this realization of emptiness is the antidote to the ignorance of self-grasping. So this is the meaning of the word antidote. It refers to the wisdom realizing emptiness, which is the antidote to the ignorance of self-grasping. And it continues, the antidote itself will also be liberated in its own nature. The antidote itself, the wisdom realizing emptiness, it itself is empty of inherent existence. And this then it also needs to be recognized and abided in. So this is the meaning of, will be liberated in its own nature. So the antidote, its own nature, is also empty of inherent existence. The first 2 points relate firstly to the object, and secondly to the object possessor, or the and that both the object and the realizing consciousness are empty of inherent existence. And what realizes this is the antidote to the ignorance of self-grasping, the consciousness which is the wisdom realizing emptiness. So this then explains the first point, the second point, and the beginning of the third point, the antidote itself. When one is meditating in this way, one is engaging in analytical meditation. Therefore, one is using conceptual consciousnesses, because one is analyzing, investigating. And any other conceptual consciousness that arises, these need to be blocked or averted, so that one continues to meditate solely on emptiness. And this then is the meaning of will also be liberated in its own nature, in that when another conceptual consciousness arises or another thought arises, whilst one is meditating on emptiness, one reminds oneself that as all phenomena are empty of inherent existence, so too is whatever this thought is that one is thinking about, both its object and this consciousness that now is thinking about it, that too is empty of inherent existence. So in this way, even when the mind is drawn away from its meditation on emptiness, one recognizes that whatever one is drawn to, that new object, as well as this consciousness that has been drawn away, both are empty of inherent existence. And in this way, one meditates without distraction on emptiness of inherent existence. So that then is the meaning of the second half of the sentence, will also be liberated in its own nature. When a text is as condensed as this, various great masters will comment on it, explain it slightly differently. So I've just presented one explanation of the third point, and I'll present another. It's about the second half of this third point. So the antidote itself remains the same, but another way to understand will also be liberated in its own nature, is that whilst one is meditating on emptiness of the object and the object possessor, the first 2 points, the apprehended and apprehender, whereas other thoughts will arise, other conceptual consciousnesses will arise. Don't pay them any attention. Just return back to what you were meditating on and recognize that it's empty of existing in it by way of its own nature. And in this way, these distracting other conceptual consciousnesses that arise will naturally dissipate themselves because you're not giving them any attention. So this then is a second way that the second part of the third line is understood. The first way was that when a distraction arises, one recognizes that consciousness and its object are empty. The second way is not to pay them attention. When a distraction arises, let it just dissipate on its own. You remain with your main object of meditation, or your initial object of meditation. So looking at the 3 points. The first one, we're meditating on the apprehended, the object, and we recognize it's empty of inherent existence. And as to the second point is the apprehending consciousness, that too is empty of inherent existence. And that recognition that all phenomena, both the object and the realizing consciousness, are empty of inherent existence is the antidote to the ignorance of self-grasping. And whilst one then, we're in the third point, whilst one has then recognized or realized this antidote, should any other distracting consciousness arise, thoughts about anything else, then one can recognize that too is empty of inherent existence. So then the fourth point, abide in the essence of the state of emptiness, the basis of all. So thus far, in the first 3 points, the meditator is engaging in analytical meditation. Now in the fourth point, the meditator engages in the second type, placement meditation. So in dependence on mindfulness and vigilance, the meditator abides, places their mind and abides on the realization of emptiness. Let's now do a full recap of what we've covered. So one comes to one's place of meditation, perhaps here or at home, and prepares one's meditation place. So this, we started with the 6 preparatory practices, where you prepare your seat, you prepare your shrine, you sit down, you generate motivation, visualize, and so forth, and then you engage in the second part, or the other part of the preliminary practices, which are now the explicit preliminary practices of meditating on the precious human rebirth and impermanence, so as to generate your enthusiasm to utilize this opportunity. And then the second part of the actual preliminaries, true sufferings and true origins, because this leads one directly into the meditation on emptiness. And one then starts the meditation on emptiness with the first point of seeing how the object, such as the self, appears, and engages in the meditation in those 5 points, recognizing that the object, let's say the self, it is empty of existing in the way that it appears. It's merely a dependence on imputation, and therefore it's like a dream. So too then is the realizing consciousness, the second point, that too doesn't exist in the way that it appears, etc. And then one comes to the third point of whilst in this meditation, there are 2 ways to understand it: either ignoring distractions and just letting them dissipate, or recognizing that the distracting consciousness and what the consciousness is distracted to are also empty of inherent existence. So that's the third point. Now the fourth point, one ceases analytical meditation and just abides on emptiness. So one has realized emptiness as the outcome of the first point and the second point, and kept it there with the third point. And now, in the fourth point, one is just abiding in emptiness. So this then is placement meditation, where your mind is placed on one object and abides there. So there you have presented a complete meditation session, a single meditation session, where one starts with the preliminaries and then engages in a meditation on emptiness. Those who are educated will meditate in this way, and those who have a good education will quickly come to the fourth point. Those who are starting out will need to spend more time at the earlier points, but this is the sequence for a meditation session on emptiness. Just mentioned, commentaries explain this brief text in differing ways. So too with the fourth point. So to talk about this term here, emptiness, the basis of all. So as a translator, I translated it in two ways. So now Geshe explains the translation of basis of all. So you could have this translated as abide in the essence of the state of the basis of all. Because this is the word, the basis of all. In Buddhist, now to what Geshe said, in Buddhist philosophy, it's presented according to varying philosophical schools. One of them presents additional consciousnesses. Amongst them, a seventh is called the mind basis of all, or it's translated as the foundation consciousness. So that is the translation here, basis of all, mind basis of all, or foundational consciousness. So this is a very stable consciousness. So the Buddhists who assert this presentation will say the other consciousnesses are not stable, whereas this is the stable consciousness that goes that from life to life. So this consciousness we need to have, as in this fourth point, as our object, and come to recognize that it is empty of inherent existence. And which of the philosophical schools assert the mind basis of all? It is the Chittamatra, the mind-only school. So they are the ones who say that the sense consciousnesses, the five sense consciousness and the mental consciousness, these aren't particularly stable. Therefore, there is a requirement for a stable consciousness, and that is the mind basis of all, or the foundation consciousness. So they say the five sense consciousnesses, so those are associated with sight and with hearing and so forth, these are unstable because when someone is in deep sleep, they are all withdrawn, but the person is still there. But the sense consciousnesses are no longer manifest, but the person is still there. The Chittamatans say not only are the five sense consciousnesses unstable, so too is the mental consciousness. Because, for example, when someone perhaps gets a great big fright and passes out, they faint, then their mental consciousness is also not at all manifest. But the person is still there, although the mental consciousness now is non-manifest. Another time, another illustration of when mental consciousness is not manifest is when a true cessation is attained, and one is in meditative equipoise on a true cessation, then the mental consciousness too. Nothing is appearing to the mental consciousness, but the person still exists. So they hold that the mind basis of all, the foundation consciousness, this is always present, whether and is therefore very stable. And it is there whether one is in deep sleep or not, whether one faints or not, or when one is in meditative equipoise on a true cessation. The mind basis of all is in this way always there, because it's so stable, unlike the mental consciousness and the sense consciousnesses. According to this explanation, the meaning of abide in the essence of the state of the basis of all means abide with placement meditation on the mind basis of all as being empty of inherent existence. So one realizes the mind basis of all, the stable consciousness, is empty, and then one abides with placement meditation on this realization. This is one explanation of this line, and it's an explanation that's in accordance with the Chittamatra view holders, and there are other explanations too. an explanation that's in accordance with the Madhyamaka schools, the two middle way schools of Prasangika and Svatantika. They would not present what I've just said, and if I was translating in accordance with that, I wouldn't use the word mind basis of all. Why? Because they do not accept that it exists. So the two Madhyamaka schools, they say there are only 6 consciousnesses. There is not any additional consciousness beyond that. There are the 5 sense consciousnesses, and there's the mental consciousness. And so therefore they don't accept that the mind basis of all, the foundational consciousness, even exists. So this then means there will be a different explanation from the two Madhyamaka schools. Whilst the Madhyamaka schools, for both the Svatantika and Prasangika, whilst they do not assert a mind basis of all, they do not accept that there's such a thing, in the Madhyamaka texts, in their texts, you will come across this term, mind basis of all. Or just to say as an aside, the Tibetan literally is basis of all. The word isn't mind, there's no word there for mind, but that's how it's translated in English. Anyway, so that term exists in the Madhyamaka texts, but the meaning will be very different. So where in the Madhyamaka text this word, mind basis of all, is found, there the meaning is not an additional consciousness, but rather emptiness. Hence, in the translation, abide in the essence or the state of emptiness. So in the Madhyamaka text, when one comes across this term, basis of all, what meaning would it mean? Because it means emptiness, but why do they use this particular term? So it has a meaning, a different understanding applied to it, which is that emptiness is the basis of all, like the translation. Emptiness is the basis of all, meaning it's a basis of abiding in samsara and nirvana. So emptiness is the basis of samsara and nirvana, not abiding in. Emptiness is the basis of samsara and nirvana. In that, because phenomena are empty, the causes that keep one bound in samsara can be accumulated, as too can the causes that lead to one's freedom from samsara and attainment of nirvana. So in this way, the basis of all is emptiness. So the basis is emptiness of all samsara and nirvana. So that then is the etymology, the meaning of this word kunshi in the Chittamartan text will be basis of all, mind basis of all. Here, a separate consciousness, but in the Madhyamaka text, emptiness is the meaning, because emptiness is the basis of both nirvana and samsara. So to explain hopefully more clearly, the meaning according to the Madhyamaka of basis of all, which is emptiness, why is it called this? Is because the one can accumulate the contaminated karma, whether virtuous or non-virtuous, that leads to the result of samsara, because the causes, non-virtuous and virtuous contaminated karma, and their result, samsara, are empty of inherent existence. One can also accumulate uncontaminated karma and attain its result, that of nirvana, because both that cause and result are also empty of inherent existence. So therefore, one, according to the Madhyamaka understanding, the middle way understanding, one here, the fourth line, abide in the essence of the state of emptiness, one would meditate on how emptiness is the very basis or foundation of both samsara and nirvana, and then abide single-pointedly on that, or abide on that with placement meditation. Talking further on this fourth point, abide in the essence, the state of emptiness. Here, someone who's wanting to cultivate calm abiding, single-pointed concentration, shamatha, on emptiness. It's at this point that they would cease doing analysis and they would try and hold their realization single-pointedly. And when they finally manage to do so, and they can hold this realization of emptiness, so the object would be emptiness, single-pointedly for as long as they wish, they would then try and take this mind of calm abiding and develop it further, so that they can also analyze without losing their calm abiding. And so they continue until they gain the union of calm abiding and meditative insight on emptiness. So this then is, so for such a yogi, it is at this point that they would first develop calm abiding, and then the union of calm abiding meditative equipoise on emptiness. And it's when they have developed the union of calm abiding meditative equipoise on emptiness, they will continue then with this union to analyze further, to deepen their realization of emptiness. And such a yogin now has attained the actual antidote that weakens the ignorance of self-grasping and brings about the abandonment of the afflictions together with their seeds ever closer. And the reason for saying it's the actual antidote is because the quality of the realizing mind is so powerful that it has the strength to really start eradicating the strength of the ignorance of self-grasping. So ideally, a practitioner in this fourth point will be cultivating calm abiding and thereafter the union of calm abiding and meditative insight. And when they achieve that, as I said, they will continue to deepen their realization of emptiness. But that alone will not lead to the attainment of Buddhahood. They also need to cultivate bodhicitta with the same quality of mind, the union of calm abiding and meditative insight. This is the second wing that was referred to yesterday. So therefore, when someone has realized emptiness, they need to progress further. And then, when they have the realization with the union of calm abiding and meditative insight, to conjoin it with the realization of bodhicitta. For those educated in the Gelugpa tradition, they will follow the meditations based on the second explanation, whereby basis of all, mind basis of all, is understood to mean emptiness. Whereas those in some other Tibetan traditions, their presentation is in accordance with the Chittamatra school, and there they will, in their translation of their school, they wouldn't have the word emptiness, but the basis of all. So there is some difference. But when you understand the explanation, that difference then, perhaps you could say it loses some significance. The difference loses significance in that those trained in the Gelug method will meditate single-pointedly on emptiness. Those educated in other schools who have accept that there is this consciousness called the basis of all, mind basis of all, they will meditate single-pointedly on that consciousness as being empty, and on the emptiness of that consciousness. So in either meditative traditions, one comes to abide, here on this fourth point, holding the realization of emptiness single-pointedly. Just to try and be sure it's clear, in this fourth point, so the two different meditative traditions, they would both be, their subject, their apprehender, would be that of the wisdom and realizing emptiness, and the object though would differ. One would, the non-Gelug would be meditating on the emptiness of the consciousness called the basis of all, and whereas the Gelug would be meditating on emptiness itself. So, but the realization on emptiness would be the same. Then to the fifth point, the fifth sub-point here. Between sessions, be like a conjurer of illusions. So thus far, in terms of the preliminary, and then those first 4 points, we have had a complete session on the meditation on emptiness. Now, one arises from that session and goes about one's business before sitting down again. Perhaps one would eat, perhaps one would need to do some activities, whatever it may be. A meditation session starts, comes to an end, and then one enters into the in-between session. And that's now the fifth point. Before moving to between sessions, just to say something further on the session itself. The general advice is very clear here. As beginners, one should engage in the meditation session, starting with the preliminaries, ending with abiding on emptiness, and that session should be short. And that session should be followed after a break by another session, which is also short. And after a break, another session, which is also short. Slowly, those sessions, as one gets more skilled in the meditation, can lengthen. But it's important, though, not to extend oneself, not to place value on how long I'm sitting for, how long my sessions are. This is a mistake, because what one wants to guard against is the mind of joy that one generates in the meditation, dissipating because it's getting a bit long, it's getting a bit boring, the body's getting a bit unhappy, and now the mind is unhappy. This then is an obstacle to engage in the meditation repeatedly over a sustained period, which is the approach required to gain realization. So therefore, as beginners, do short sessions, but frequently, many. Slowly over time, you can approach having each session being an hour. And after that, slowly over time, the session of an hour can get a bit longer, eventually 2 hours. So like that. But one starts with short sessions, which are frequent. When one is in meditation, then even if one's mind is not particularly concentrated, generally the sense consciousnesses are not that active. One is primarily engaging in meditation with one's mental consciousness. But when the session has ended and one stood up, immediately things start appearing to your sense consciousnesses. You'll be seeing things, you'll be hearing things, and therefore you'll be thinking about what you're seeing and what you're hearing. You'll also, things will come in contact with your body. There'll be the sensation of touch, and then thoughts relating to what you're touching. There'll be sensations in terms of smell and thoughts about that. And then there'll be sensations of taste. Perhaps you're eating something and thoughts about that. So your 5 sense consciousnesses now are becoming active again, as well as then the resulting mental consciousnesses following from them. So the guidance then, between sessions, is to be like a conjurer of illusions. So the final step of the meditation on emptiness, you remind yourself that everything that appears doesn't exist in the way that nothing exists in the way that it appears, but is rather like a dream. Now, between sessions, the text advises to use a different analogy rather than a dream, but that of like an illusion. So you remind yourself everything that you are thinking about, which will most commonly come about independent on the sense consciousnesses. This is like an illusion. It does not exist in the way that it appears. So, for example, if one sees a bird and hears a bird, what I'm seeing, this bird, it doesn't exist in the way that it appears. And its sound, too, doesn't exist in the way that it appears. What I'm seeing is like an illusion. What I'm hearing is like an illusion. So in this way, you take the outcome, or you take your meditation, and you keep it active in your way of thinking whilst you are moving about the day between your sessions. And this is really important, because whatever progress you made in your meditation, you don't want to lose it, you don't want it to dissipate, but rather you actually want it to strengthen. So by keeping it active in your mind, by relating everything that you encounter through the understanding gained in your meditation, your understanding of emptiness will not only not dissipate, but actually be strengthened. So these first 5 points now we've looked at completely, and this presents the one part, a major part of the main practice. So we've had a complete meditation session thus far on the preliminaries and meditation on emptiness, including both the meditation and the post-meditation, the between sessions. Just to talk a little more further about that 4th point. So when one is meditating on emptiness, the basis of all, and one is abiding there with placement meditation, one utilizes mindfulness and vigilance to prevent the mind from being distracted. And in this way, the yogin will come to develop calm abiding in relation to emptiness. So the object is emptiness. The realizing consciousness will be able to hold this realization of emptiness single-pointedly, unwaveringly. Then, eventually, the yogin will develop calm abiding further so that they can, without losing the single-pointed concentration, can engage in analysis and meditate further with emptiness. This then is the union of calm abiding and meditative insight. So that then is required for one to gain the actual realizations of emptiness and for the bodhisattva to eventually become an Arya bodhisattva and attain actual ultimate bodhicitta. Because it's only when the bodhisattva realizes emptiness directly that they become an Arya bodhisattva and they have ultimate bodhicitta. So for ourselves, that's still a way off, but nevertheless, with whatever level of concentrated mind we have, here, in the meditation we get to the fourth step, we abide as best we can. And slowly over time, our mind will get more stable. But what we are doing is we are gaining familiarity, developing habituation to the meditation method that will eventually lead us to becoming Arya Bodhisattvas ourselves. Meditating on emptiness like this greatly aids one's cultivation of compassion. So what is this relationship? How does one's understanding of emptiness aid one's understanding of, or one's generation of compassion? When one has done these meditations for a while on emptiness, and one has gained a little bit of skill in recognizing that phenomena do not exist in the way they appear, but are empty of existing in the way they appear. When that has started to have an impact on oneself, one recognizes, I can abandon the afflictions together with their seeds and attain Buddhahood. I recognize that my afflictions are being impacted, are being reduced by my understanding of emptiness. Therefore, I know that what I've been taught is actually true. I'm gaining experience that I can eradicate ignorance and thereby eventually attain Buddhahood. So in other words, one's conviction and confidence in one's own capacity to cultivate the path becomes very strong. This then aids all other qualities of the Dharma, the cultivation of all other qualities of the Dharma, compassion, bodhicitta, and confidence engaging in the six perfections of bodhisattvas. So this is how the cultivation of the wisdom, understanding emptiness, aids the cultivation of other great qualities of the Dharma, such as compassion. Let's give an analogy to make the relationship between compassion and the wisdom, understanding emptiness, hopefully clear. Is if you imagine you can't swim, and you're on the side of a riverbank, and you see someone being swept away by the current, and this person is crying out for help. They clearly cannot save themselves, and their death is imminent. What can you do? There's nothing, you don't know how to swim, the riverbank is bare, there's nothing to throw them, you are helpless. So compassion arises within you, but you can do nothing. On the other hand, let's say you've seen this, now you go away and you learn how to swim. And not only how to swim, but how to swim really well. And not only how to swim well, but how to actually save someone who's overwhelmed with fear, how to be a skilled lifesaver. Then, should you find yourself in that same position again, just like before, compassion will arise. But the compassion now is quite different, because it's conjoined with a confidence. This is the kind of compassion, this is an indispensable feature of what is meant by compassion in Buddhism. It has confidence. Confidence based on, I know why this person is in this predicament, and I know what to do about it. And not just intellectually, I have the skill. So again, I know why this person is in this predicament. I know what needs to be done about it. And thirdly, I know what to do. And then you do so. So this comes from this confidence. What we normally call compassion, we see it has a confidence that leads to skilled action, not blind action, not just hoping for the best, but skilled action. So this is the meaning of compassion in Buddhism. It has this meaning of confidence, a strength of mind, and therefore it's inexhaustible. It doesn't get worn out from helping, but rather it just gets invigorated by helping. So then, to bring the illustration directly to this teaching, when one has come to have an understanding of emptiness, so that this understanding is having an impact on one's lived experience, then one knows why I am suffering, so the understanding of true sufferings and true origins, and I know what can be done about it, the cultivation of the wisdom realizing emptiness, and I'm gaining some skill in that, I'm seeing the impact. This leads to a great confidence within. And then the compassion we have when we observe others who are blindly making mistakes, not knowing what they are doing is actually leading to suffering and not happiness, that compassion that arises is conjoined with a confidence of, I know how to guide these people because I have gained skill myself. So this is how wisdom, understanding emptiness, aids the cultivation of actual compassion. So compassion that is not just empathy, but compassion conjoined with confidence and strength of mind. The state or the feeling of helplessness that all too often arises, this comes about due to not yet having a transformative experience such as has been described here. Because generally the way we all too often feel, the only way I can help immeasurable sentient beings is to pray for them, to dedicate merit for them. And in terms of my own attainment of Buddhahood, it seems something quite far off, something almost out of reach. And only really through prayer and dedication will I eventually get there. So one has a good heart, a good attitude. One wants to be of benefit to others. One wants to become an enlightened being so that one can aid others in a skillful way. But other than prayer, what can we really do for them? When one has a transformative impact like this confidence that gives rise to actual compassion means when we encounter suffering beings, even if we continuously encounter suffering beings, this will only spur us to be of ever greater, to spiritually develop, to be of ever greater help, because we'll understand reality, that by accumulating further causes, I can be of ever more help. And for others, by guiding them to accumulate further causes, they can turn away from harmful behavior. So here, one's mind is becoming both very confident, but wise in the sense of spacious, not grasping at the moment of helping right now, but knowing I have the skill to help, slowly helping guide others to develop the causes. Here one has the confidence, I can achieve Buddhahood by striving to accumulate further causes. I can help others gain freedom from suffering by slowly guiding them to gain freedom from their suffering. And in this way, hopefully it becomes clear that by meditating on emptiness, feeling its impact, confidence will arise with one's compassion, and thereby one will apply oneself with ease to the Dharma, because one knows the goals of the Dharma are achievable, they are within my grasp. We looked at these 5 points. We take you back to the very first point there, the first sub-point, and that is to the term all phenomena. So all phenomena are empty of an inherent existence, and we should relate to them as being like dreams. So this term all phenomena, it means everything that exists. So in your meditation, you go through all phenomena, one by one, seeing how they appear, and recognizing they don't exist in this way. For example, take happiness that you experience. Take suffering that you experience. And you see that they too appear to you as inherently existent, as existing by way of their own nature, and you investigate and you recognize that they don't. So you go through the 5 steps, and you recognize that they are empty of inherent existence. But, and in the 4th step, It's not that happiness does not exist or suffering does not exist, rather they are dependent arisings. Independence on imputation by mind, on causes, interdependent with others, and so forth. So this is important to do, because in this way, by meditating, again with this term all phenomena, on a wide variety, on a broad, wide variety of phenomena, then one's understanding of emptiness will have a profound impact on your life, on every aspect of your life. For example, taking happiness, there are those that you get on with, that you care for, that you have close relationships with. So, sources of happiness. You recognize that the good relationship you have with this person or these people, that too appears as inherently existent, but it doesn't exist by way of its own nature. It comes about in dependence on causes, which means I need to ensure I continue to develop such causes to keep the relationship good. And likewise, and then one can also turn attention to those one doesn't get on with, those that one has a difficult relationship with, and recognize that poor relationship doesn't self-exist. It's come about in dependence on causes. Therefore, by trying to cultivate opposite causes, opposing causes, that relationship will slowly change. And we know in our life this has happened. Both of these, good relationships become bad, bad relationships become good. Independence on causes. So from this then, we come to the outcome of both not clinging to my dear friendship, my hated enemy, but recognizing this is just two manifestations of accumulation of causes. And for the desired result that we all want, it's a certain specific set of causes, virtuous causes, to accumulate, and others to avoid, the non-virtuous causes. Here, you see, your mind is becoming much lighter in relation to both friends and enemies, not seeing them as inherently existent good that I must hold on to with attachment, or hideous enemies I must push away with aversion, but rather just an expression of the causes accumulated. Therefore, nothing more than that. No need to get too attached to the one, too averse to the other, but just focus on accumulating the causes for happiness that will bring benefit in this and lives to come. So this is a further way that you take this meditation and apply it to all facets of your life, and your life will be transformed thereby. There's a vast difference between an ordinary person who has an integrated understanding of emptiness and an ordinary person who does not. In that, their ignorance of self-grasping differs greatly in strength. So I want to be clear, I'm not talking about a highly realized being here. An ordinary person who has had some transformative impact from their meditations and studies on emptiness. For them already, the ignorance of self-grasping is starting to weaken. Therefore, the way they relate to their day, what they encounter, is vastly different from how they used to or how other people do. People tend to get very excited when things go in the way they like and are devastated when they don't. In relation to themselves or in relation to their group. When someone, perhaps a family member, a loved one, part of their group, things go well, it's great elation. When things go badly, then they are devastated. And this comes from the strength of their ignorance of self-grasping. Where someone who's meditated well, repeatedly over a sustained period in the way presented here, when they encounter things that they like or dislike, their response is similar. They relate to what they are encountering as nothing more than an expression of causes that have been accumulated. There's a wide variety of causes that have come and are arising in a particular dream-like way or illusion-like way, and in dependence on further causes, I'm relating to this, I'm drawn towards it or repulsed from it. Nothing more. So they are they're not caught up in the dream, thinking it's reality. They're not caught up in the illusion, thinking it's reality. They're recognizing that what's desired or what's not desired is not that different. It's just about a different arisal of causes from the same basis of emptiness. This person then is not getting caught up in the world. Their mind is staying spacious and relaxed, and thereby can engage with others, motivated by virtuous minds, motivated by compassion. So thank you. Then we can conclude there for today. And tomorrow we'll continue with the sixth subpoint, which is where the presentation on conventional bodhicitta begins. But we have a question from Dave?
Just in regard to holy objects as being part of whole phenomena, given that they're man-made, built, and then imputed as stupa, for instance, we are taught that circumambulating can really affect our karma in a positive way. So where does that power come from? Where are the causes?
So holy objects, we learn that holy objects are holy, and but they are man-made, they're being consecrated, and now we relate to them in a particular way. So how does, it seems like there's something from the side of the object that makes them, that leads to us accumulating virtue. So how does that sit with the presentation on emptiness? So if we take as an illustration, two people, maybe you, walking around the stupa with a friend, and the friend has no faith in anything, but they walking with Dave, and so they're chatting away. Both of you are doing circumambulation. You have faith in that the stupa is a consecrated object, and so therefore, whilst chatting to your friend, you accumulate some virtue. Whilst your friend has no faith in this Buddhist stuff, but he's chatting to you, and your friend also accumulates virtue. So how does this work? There's the question. So certainly between the two of you, there will be a vast difference in how much virtue is accumulated. And how that you accumulate virtue as a person with faith is clear because of your mind of faith. Then what about your friend who has none? So through the lama's consecration of, in this case, the stupa, and the prayers that are made in that consecration, through the power of that mind, the mind of the consecrating lama or lamas, that person creates some virtue. Not so much, but at least something. So the dependency comes about through the process of consecration, as opposed, and so the mind of the consecrating person is part of the dependency for the person whose mind is not engaged in a way, in a virtuous way. Did I say it clearly? So I really want to compliment you on that question, because what the question exposes is that you're thinking about the meaning of the Dharma, and this is imperative. And for you, as presumably a convert to Buddhism, you will bring a whole lot of doubts that someone who's grown up in the religion will things that they will take naturally because of the culture they grew up in. However one grows up, one needs to think in this way. Why is it like this? Is it really like this? And investigate and analyze, because then the understanding that one comes to is transformative. And this process will take lifetimes. So if your mind is satisfied now, great. If it's not, great. The outcome needs to be the same. Continue to think, continue to analyze. And over time, one will come across further reasons that dispel things that you have doubt about. Whether, if you still have doubt about this, further reasons will come because there are others, and your doubt then will be dispelled. And other things right now that you struggle with and say, no, I don't accept this, that's fine. In time, you'll come to find reasons that may well dispel those doubts. So this process that you are showing here is excellent, and this is something that everyone needs to do. This is how we change our minds.